How many people tasted sherries?
Where did it go? Okay, Chassagne.
All right.
All right,
well,
okay.
You know the drill.
You better rinse out. Do you have water? Drink
Unless
some water.
Unless you want the first two wines to taste a little rancio. You can, maybe, actually, you know what you should do is you should go back to the pasta ground because it has enough acid to kill any residual rancio in your mouth. And then you can move forward.
All right.
But again, it's your decision.
Okay, so now we're in Chassagne, which is historically red. So even, recently there's a lot of red wine there, even into the 1980s. And then as vineyards needed to be replaced or whatever, people just started putting more white in because white Chassagne is very highly desirable, regardless of the climat. And red Chassagne isn't so much. How many of you have a red Chassagne Montrachet on your wine list? Those of you who are sommeliers out of there. Okay, so a few. And how many have a white Chassagne Montrachet on their wine list? Fewer. Wait, what's up? Okay, I was going to make a comparison, but it seems like fewer people have the white. I don't think that's true. I think people aren't voting, which seems to be a problem in this country anyway. Chassagne Montrachet is, I shouldn't say that anyway. Chassagne Montrachet is historically red, but most have been replanted. But in 36, look at that statistic. In 36, 80% of Chassagne was red. 80. So very few whites. In 82, 52 were red. 85. So this is 82. This is already my era, okay? And then 92, it's 45, and today, I don't even know, it's probably 30.
So,
okay.
no, it's, I have the statistics.
Do you have the current statistic?
In this fabulous book, if you want to get geeky someday.
All right.
That book has a lot of statistics in it. But there's 177 hectares of white, which is 112 Premier Cru, the 132 hectares of red.
Still more.
And
okay,
34, yeah, it's 34, yeah.
Yeah, so it's still like what it was in 92 a little bit. 34, so you're saying 34%. 34.
Around, yeah, 30.
Oh, I said 30, so I was close. 36. Getting there. It'll be 30 pretty soon. It'll be 20 probably someday. Anyway, so, I mean, that's the way it's going. Look at that. From 36 to 82 to 92, what a change. Anyway, Julien in 1824 states the red wines of Morgeau, La Maltroit, and Clos Saint-Jean are equal to Musigny, Amoureuse, and Clos de Roche, and Clos de Tar. Clos de la Roche and Clos de Tar. That's interesting, right? Would you think of those today, Chassagne Rouge being equivalent to Musigny? I don't think so. So I don't know what happened. Maybe it was the change to grafted vines. I don't know. Anyway, Côte de Beaune, we have Chassagne soils these are more like what you see in Meursault in some ways, a Bathonian oolith. So Bathonian meaning like you see in the town of Bath in England. That's what these names come from. Oxfordian was like the limestone they saw at Oxford. Bathonian is like the limestone they see in Bath. So when they made up these names, they looked at what they saw most frequently. So these names don't have any other meaning than that's what they saw there. And oolith, again, it's that egg-shaped limestone. And you have clay, marl. It looks very much like parts of Meursault. And then you have chalk also, depending on the site. Flaky limestone gravels and some chalk underneath, depending on the site. And that's why you get a cray or criot, like Criot, Betard, Montrachet. It doesn't come from crying or anything like on cri, like a cry. It comes from cray. So it's a what you would call a transformation from cray or chalk. So it's very similar. And then you have lower down on the hills, you have like in Morgeau, you have more iron. Again, like the Terre Rouge, and again, they seem to be better for some of the red wines. And there was a lot of Morgeau planted red. And the best reds are from the northwest end of the village, though, in Clos Saint-Jean, Verger, and Chenepot.
Yeah, so even, I mean, if you taste Chassagne Montrachet from the center of the village, because the best crus were basically just above the village Chassagne, and now, of course, been grafted to Chardonnay, and you can taste the wines. They have that rusticity. They have kind of that high phenolic, because it does have quite a bit of clay, and when, not to come back to the same point, but if you have more clay and you have white grapes, you have more phenolics. So, because when there's less clay, white grapes do better. But if you have a lot of clay, that's why at the bottom of Pouligny, there's the heavy clay soils, and the wines just seem more plump. And this is the opposite, because there's a quarry. So the first quarry of Burgundy comes just around Primo-Prissy, and the second major quarry is just behind Chassania. And there's also something we haven't spoken about, we'll talk a little bit more about in these wines, is the phenomenon of the comb. The comb are the little valleys, because if you're facing north-south, you have different vineyards facing east, and these little valleys where the cold wind comes. So for example, between Pouligny and Chassania, there's a comb, and that comb is the town of Saint-Aubin on one side. And then on just north of that, we didn't speak about, there's another red appellation we didn't include here. There's very few producers of Blany, which is basically above Pouligny-Montrachet, behind Meursault. A little pocket of Pinot Noir is grown there, but people have grafted Pinot to Chardonnay there also. There's the infamous wines of Matro, which age really well. But it's a very it's a place with a lot of forest there. So the wines have this kind of herbaceousness just because of the surrounding, because it's not open. Of course, there's red Pinot Noir also grown in Saint-Aubin, but it's pretty high. And with this kind of warming temperatures, those wines are also quite delicious. But Chassagne-Montrachet, I think, is maybe one of the most important and overlooked, forgotten red appellations, because it's taken, the name Chassagne-Montrachet taken from the most important vineyard in the area. But it's a very important place for Pinot Noir, and they age. I mean, we've had some old wines in the 50s and 60s from Chassagne Rouge, even village wines, and I'm out of touch with the pricing, but Larry, is it a value?
Yeah, they're value. I mean, for example,
says the
the
value.
Fleuve used to have one, you couldn't give it away. I mean, we used to get it for like $12 a bottle or something at the time. The whites were going for 80 because they would try to post it off. So if you look around, some distributors may have some older wines around that they can't, because Blany Rouge you hardly ever see anymore. And because it is, as they say, over the last 30, 40 years, it's all been planted to white, because you can sell a Blany Blanc for the same price, or even more now, I see, than some of the vineyards in Meursault itself.
Yeah, you call it Meursault Blany, even though it's actually Blany.
Yeah.
But if you ever see an old bottle, and it's a secret, don't tell your friends.
Oh, yeah. Well, don't publish it on Instagram. You tell your friends, but tell them.
Yeah, if you ever see an old bottle of Ramenais Rouge,
yeah, Ramenais,
unbelievable. I mean,
But Raj brought up another thing. So he was going up the valley where the winds are coming down from the Haute Côte. You have Saint-Romain, which also has red wine, and Saint-Romain can make some really good red wine. There are a couple that I like very much. And but then a lot of that also goes to Negos, so you can find a Saint-Romain from a really good producer, red, and it's pretty good value. Osé de Rest, there's less of it, but it can be really good. And,
Montelly.
And Montelly. There's some more famous producers in Montelly. I like Saint-Aubin, Osé de Rest, Saint-Romain, and Osé have. I think Saint-Romain has the most interesting red if you have a good vineyard. But there are areas we're not talking about up in the Haute Côte. Again, I mentioned that earlier. If you go to the Haute Côte de Nuit or some other of the appellations, you can actually get, depending on the site, you have to know the producer and where their vineyards are located. You can get some really good value for the money, because those hills are also based on the limestone that forms the basis for the Côte d'Or, the Premier and Grand Cru. But it tends to be more variable. You can't just predict. You have to know particular producers, growers, and vineyard sites.
Yeah, we only had a 12 wine max, so
yeah.
Otherwise, we would have added another bunch, but it was.
But I think those are interesting. I would have liked to have those than some of the bigger names, because very few of us get to taste those regularly. But these are a great selection. Lamy is still pretty good value.
Oh yeah.
And a friend of ours, Daniel Jonas, imports it.
No, Becky Wasserman does.
Oh, Becky Wasserman?
Yeah.
Oh, he brings it in though for New York, I guess. Anyway.
Maybe Grand Cru. Maybe Grand Cru sells it in New York. But I think one of the most impressive visits, and you better have a big thick book ready to take notes, because Olivier definitely takes you to the vineyard. He has some pretty amazing ideas on planting, on of course viticulture, and also high density. He has, I guess, a special parcel which he calls it high density in Saint-Aubin. So this is a Chassagne Rouge. He makes a few reds, but the white wines of Lamy are as good as any other white wine in Burgundy, and just taut and focused and and all coming from the vineyard and making some of the most amazing wines. And I've only had a few examples of the red in the last 5 odd years, but this one is another superb example. Quite open and, again, quite delicious, because sometimes Chassagne Rouge can be quite austere and rustic. And again, a wine from we're going to have a couple of reds from white wine producers, and it's always very interesting because, in Burgundy they say, usually they make either great whites or great reds, and there are a few who make, both really well. And here's an example of a top white wine producer making, I think, a delicious red wine. So this is a vineyard, La Goujon, which is it's below the village. It's like basically, it's the last vineyard. After that, it's a farmland, and then the highway. It's a lower parcel, but quite plush, I think, Larry?
Mm-hmm. I think for Lamy, I think this is one of the better ones. I think Olivier that must have had a better influence than the father, because the wines, reds.
Father, I think, is not.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so since '95, the earlier wines I found to be kind of simple, both red and white. But today they're much better. I just don't like their corks. I won't go there. And if any of you've opened a bottle on me, they use these plastic corks that I just don't like very much. Some other producers use them, but I find them objectionable. But anyway. Anyway, but the wine is good. The wine is better, so that's what counts more than the cork. So again, all destemmed, but it has really great tannin structure. I think it's round. It has nice richness of flavor on the mid palate, and pretty good length. So it's a well done wine. And again, because there's a Chassagne Montrachet Rouge, it's probably a good value. Did we look up the price on this? Do we know? Anybody out there know what the price may
David?
be? Okay, thanks. Yeah, so that's pretty good value considering.
So 60s or 70 bucks retail?
Yeah, 50s.
Yeah,
actually.
that's, I guess, in
50s.
relative terms, a good value.
Mm-hmm. All right. There we go. So now we're in Santenay. So now we're leaving like the area that would be really where you have Premier Grand Cru a lot, and you're going to an area that is less, I think for sommeliers has been less of a focus. I mean, I used to have one, a Santenay, but no one ever really wanted it. People don't demand it. It's kind of the unloved part. When you get towards the Chalonnaise, when you're going south of Chassagne, it kind of, the world ends for some people. And there's actually, from a collector point of view, it ends. You don't go south of there. And here, Santenay has some pretty good vineyard land, and also it's a large producer. When I looked at the statistics, I go like, oh my God, it's so big. In terms of production, it's third behind Meursault, Gevrey, and Beaune, or fourth. I guess Meursault, Gevrey, and Beaune are big. Beaune is huge, and Meursault is also very large. And you get to Santenay, and it's almost up there. So that's what's interesting, because we don't see it. So it has to go somewhere, and I imagine it's drunk a lot in France and in Europe, and we don't see it so much.
Yeah, mostly a red appellation, so it's 350 odd hectares of red, and a little bit of white, so 44 hectares of Chardonnay planted, with 14 in Premier Cru. So I guess, my favorite and the old wines of Gérard Potel, so Poustor, who made Claude Savane and Gravier, both the two most important Premier Cru. And it's also the most important house in Santenay is where Aubert de Villain lives, which used to be the house of Dubois-Blanchet, which is, if you're standing in Santenay, you can see this one big house, and that's where Aubert lives now, I guess. So his residence there. So.
But I think the only ones that I've had from Santenay that have had distinction that you mentioned is Potel, the old ones. So again, when I was in London on a different trip, we went to a restaurant. It was Noble Rot, and they have this extra wine list. If you go there, sometimes you just say, "What do you have?" And they had two bottles. They had two wines. One was an Angerville 71, and the other one was a Nicolas Potel Tavan 71, and I go like, I'll take the Potel, and they're going like, well, we had one, it wasn't so good. I said, you must have had an off bottle. I bet it's great. I mean, I want to have it for personal reasons because I visited Gerard Potel, the father of Nico, who was running this estate. I visited him several times, and he was always such a gentleman. And as Raj mentioned, he was the mentor to Jacques Cess. He was a person who really inspired a lot of people in Burgundy because he had a lot of soul. He was a mentor. He loved being a mentor, and anybody coming in, he would help teach them. So I really have he has a special place in my heart. And it was tragic in his last years that his son couldn't take over Pustor because the owners were, they were from another country. They were, I think, Australian or something. They were from England, and they just didn't want the son to take over. And so he felt like it was kind of a defeat that the next generation couldn't participate. But the best wines of Santenay have been Côte de Beaune in my mind, but it's basically based on one producer, which shows you the importance of having really good farming. And I think, unfortunately, in this area, what the thing that you run up against is not that the sites are better or worse so much, it's that the price for it and the farming and the mentality of the whole area is not for the highest quality as a whole. It's more for production. They're more farming. It's an area that had more polyculture traditionally even until the modern era. And so they weren't focused only on making outstanding wine. But there's a possibility, as we can see, as we get a glimpse of with Potel.
And there's a lot of Morays in Santenay. So Pierre-Yves Collin Moray, Peter Collin, his wife, Caroline Moray, makes a wine in Santenay. And
yeah, there are
who else? There's Jean-Marc Moray makes a Santenay. Yeah. There's Vincent Moray makes a Santenay. So a few producers, but again, pretty much not. And here's a producer who is, again, primarily a white wine producer making Santenay from a important parcel, Clos Tavan.
Mm-hmm. But the ones that I'm talking about from Potel were whole clusters.
Whole cluster, yeah. Potel wines are all whole clusters.
So
yeah.
There may be something to that whole cluster thing a little bit. Anyway, well, I like both, as I said. But anyway, Jean-Noël Gagnard, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, well known for making wines from Chassagne Montrachet, make a little bit of Batard, tiny little quantity, delicious whites, and this is, I think, a really delicious red, really kind of forward and plump, because many Santenays are quite lean and austere. And again, I was talking about that kind of shift in warmer vintages or sunnier vintages, maybe, or drier vintages. And you get good potential alcohol and wine, which is, quite plump. Fully destemmed, made in a traditional fashion with quarter new oak. And but I think, this is a really delicious wine, I think, for a Santenay, which is most times, I think, just pretty taut. And also small production, so, about 6 barrels, around 6 barrels. Yeah, thank you, David, for parting with all these little wines. Even though they're little appellations and small wines, it's not, I emailed Peter Wasserman to kind of, and then he'll dial me in with David, and we were lucky to get these wines, it's one case out of 100, maybe, I don't know, 20 came to the country or whatever, 50 came to the country, so it's pretty cool to have it here, and so anyway. But a very important domain, making great wine for many, many years, and known for most of the whites, but a delicious red.
All right. And Caroline is a family member, so I wrote down Caroline Lestimé. So she's not an employee, it's just her married name. So there we go. In Morange.
Morange.
So Morange. When I was studying to be a master sommelier, there were 3 Moranges you had to know, and now there's only 1. See, things get easier for the younger generation. And
yeah, Larry used to recite, like I remember, I think his MS test, he used to recite the appellations either north to south or east to west. Like, you know, if you ask him a question about any region, he would not tell you the appellation just in the order he remembers, but exactly in the order from north to south or east to west. And yeah, so.
I like maps, so it's easy. Anyway, so, you know, again, this is an area I think, again, it's like when you get to these areas, it's like the producers. So I love Chevreau. It's a producer in the Mirage now, and he's in the center near Disease. He's a great producer, makes great wine every year, so it's one to look for, but he's not represented today. But I think there are other producers that can make good wine there. It's just that you have to know, like there's some Negociant wine from there, and again, the prices aren't that expensive. So if you find a good vintage and you find a Negoce that you like, those are usually very inexpensive relative to other appellations, even more so than Santenay. And you're really now you're almost at the you're at the edge of the Chalonnaise when you're in the Mirage. You know, this is already, you usually pass it by on the way to Chagny to eat at La Maloise or something if you're hosted by someone in the Côte d'Or, and or you have an interest in Côte Chalonnaise wines and Mâconnais. So anyway. You look at again, it's limestone. This is the classic theme. It's different limestones in different villages, and you have a gentle slope. It's not like the hillsides anymore. Brown limestone, so a little more organic matter mixed into it, so a little more, and heavier, more clay. So again, production can be quite huge in Mirage. So if they're not really very, dutiful, diligent in the vineyard, they can have fairly large production there. And there's really almost all the red from Les Mirages. The three villages share the vineyard's names, Mirage. There are different sub-appellations that I put up there. Les Mirages, en Mirage, Les Plantes en Mirage, and there's only a couple of smaller crus in there that have a different name. Clos de Roi, which is very elevated for Mirage, I guess. The King's Vineyard, and La Fouissière. So.
Yeah, like 160 hectares of red.
Yeah.
Easily 5 hectares of white under Morange, so quite a small area. So the soil, so we didn't go too deep into geology here just because we have so many wines to go through and we want to leave plenty of time for questions in the end. So, so Morange, around this area, there's a lot of influence, of course, from soils from the Oxfordian. Plus, there's a lot of kind of iron-based soils, especially in the bottom part of the hills. And then you have some sandy soils coming from, and some kind of these large rocks of limestone coming from the south. So we didn't, of course, in the Mâconnais, it's mostly white grapes planted, and you have younger soils. So, for example, the Côte de Nuit is 175 million years old. The Côte de Beaune will be around 140 to 150. And then when you're moving in here, you have a mix of soils between 150 and some even older. Just it's a hodgepodge. It's not, and the slopes are much more gentle. So if you drive through this area, they're not super steep, but they are very gradual hills. So of course the Premier Cru is again in the middle part, some even on the top part. And most of the village wine where this comes from is on the bottom part of the hill. I think Sarrazin has been a top producer in Morange. I think been around here. There is a North Berkeley wine, a few of them here, and Hinkle, and back in the day, and now Billy Weiss. So I think, and this wine always gets top accolades from in the area, I think, because many Moranges, over the yields are so big, and the wines tend to be much more austere.
No, this is good. This has a lot of concentration of flavor. It shows attention to the yields in the vineyard. The flavor is persistent, and again, it's 100% destemmed, which I think in the Côte de Beaune really can make some wonderful wines that are lovely to drink young, and I don't think people age them. It's not the kind of cruise that you want to put on your list and see what it does in 20 years. I mean, even if it could. I mean, I think some of them, like the Botel, obviously aged for quite a while, no problem. But that's not the idea for most of the wines from Santenay or Les Moranges, especially where you see people like Drouhin having bigger volume wines that they're buying up from growers and putting in Negociant labels. It's meant to be drunk and be beautiful young. And I think when it's destemmed, and if you handle your fermentation properly with not too much pump over or pigeage, then you can make elegant wines. But this wine has more substance, and it definitely will be age-worthy. But I think it's delicious now.
Yeah, and I think the new oak definitely kind of helps, rounds the tannins out. It's
Which is
you don't see that much new oak usually in a small appellation.
I was going to say, you don't taste it for 50%, and Francois Frère tends to have a fairly high toast, so that you can, often you can taste it in a wine, and so I think it's very seamless for here. Do you know them? Have you visited them, Guy and Jean-Yves?
I have not. No, I've just tasted from many vintages, but never visited them. No.
All right. So I guess that's it for now. We're out of the Côte de Beaune, so we're leaving. Any questions on Côte de Beaune?
Let's do questions in the end. So
we have the last three wines, which are we're in the Chalonnaise. We have nothing from the Mâconnais, although as I said, there are red wines in the Mâconnais, and they're worth seeking out because there's some really great producers that make excellent wines. Merlin is a favorite, but there are others. And and you can include in that wines that are just say Bourgogne, but they're actually could be technically Beaujolais. But again, you're not looking at Pinot when you're in the South Mâconnais. You're a lot of Gamay. So there's some Pinot, but mainly Gamay. So Roulis, these are things also as a sommelier working at fancy restaurants we don't sell a lot of because there's not much call for them from connoisseurs who would be willing to spend a lot more for something with a more elevated appellation. But there are actually for a long time. I mean, I think of the next wine especially, but there are other places in the Mâconnais that make, and the Chalonnaise, Côte Chalonnaise, that make really fantastic wines at age and that are worthy of putting on a list. And this is, when you look at the soils, it's 2/3 white. You look at Roulis. Roulis is only 1/3 red, and the heights, you get the elevation there. There's some elevation, but in general, it's very more diverse. So you find hills, but you also find flatter areas mixed in the Chalonnaise. These are brown limestone soils with not that much clay in Roulis. And you have red wines that are composed of black fruits and red fruits combined, licorice. So there's some depth of flavor here that you can find.
Mostly, I mean, I've always, we wanted to kind of show a Roulis, but most of Roulis is white. Oops, sorry, I had a timer for half-hour mark left. So mostly white, and then there's 122 hectares of red. So lots of red planted, but here you can taste the wine and you can see the austere, you can see the tannin and how dry the wine is. So when you have Pinot grown on very low clay soils, like this one here, you can taste the tannins, you can get that, the dryness in your mouth, and that's just the character of the place. Because most of the Roulis you see in the marketplace, we'll see mostly white. There's not a lot of high quality red grown. This is definitely a top producer from the Chalonnaise, and it's a little parcel around it's 0.6 hectare right there. And again, they've been known for their farming for many years, and you can see the influence of barrel again. I think a little bit drier and more taut and you'll see that in the next three wines because that's what defines the Côte Chalonnaise. They are, quite different than maybe the last three wines we had in the first flight, but they do have that, that austere tannin, and even in warmer vintages, I tasted the 17 not too long ago, and that was quite opulent but didn't have the same kind of dryness. But I guess 16, you can see that the acidity and the really taut, the taut flavors.
Yeah.
They also make a little bit of wine. They also have some vineyards in the Côte de Beaune and Côte de Nuit, but mostly in the Côte Chalonnaise.
I had this a month ago. It seemed more open. Maybe it had more air at the time. These wines, this actually has a lot of tannin structure. It's very round though on the whole. It has a very round, fruitier aspect, mid palate. It's very pleasant. It has great acid structure as well. So it would be a nice wine, I think, to have with cheese, with meat. But it's not a wine you want with fish necessarily or lighter things that we like to do in the West Coast where we have salmon with Pinot Noir. It's a little bit more tannin in there. Again, you see it's destemmed. It's a lot of the things that are very common in the Côte de Beaune.
You have 17-hectare estate, and this is a little parcel from there.
Right. We don't see that much. I think, was this the distributor that I ran into in Texas, or was this also?
This is North Berkeley.
This is North Berkeley.
Yeah.
All right.
And they've brought these wines in for many, many years.
Yeah.
You see a lot in Paris restaurants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had this like a month ago in Texas, of all places. So I said, oh, we can have one, but we already got some from North Berkeley. So I don't know what else to say. Probably some of you may be more familiar with it than I am. Raj referred to North Berkeley because I didn't buy a lot from them in the old days, but they're much better now. They had no. Well, we won't go into that. Back then they depended on Mr. Hinckley or whatever. Everything was a Hinckley Reserve and had too much.
Okay,
new
next.
Yeah, okay, next wine.
Right along.
I don't like a lot of new oak in my wines. Anyway, Côte Chalonnaise, Mercurey. Now, this is my favorite. And when we get to this,
hang on. Number 11, you said, was in front of number 9.
Yeah, it's
okay.
just left to right in the back. So this is my favorite. When I think of the Chalonnaise, this is my favorite appellation there. And there are lots of producers that make good stuff. And I mentioned Claude de Miglan because you can see that all over the world pretty much, and that's I think one of the best. I think unfortunately I shouldn't say unfortunately. I think that's one of the best wines that Faiveley makes. It's really delicious for the region, and again, you have meticulous farming there. Again, it's like 230 to 320 meters, which you saw also before at Roulis. That's about the zone. And here we have Oxfordian limestone. It's marly, which it's kind of like a soil type you may see in the Côte de Beaune near Chassagne, actually, or north. And then on the east side, they grow in mainly calcic soils, but they're deeper. And the west, you have crystalline Jurassic rocks and gravels. So you see three different areas. So you can have a Mercurey that's very light and pretty and raspberry oriented, and you can have a Mercurey that's more like plum and black cherry, and you can have different weights, medium, but usually they're medium to lighter. And this is the best producer. This is one of the best sites in Mercurey, and we were very fortunate to get it. It was a last-minute thing that we got to. Thank you, Becky Wasserman.
No, this is Kermit Lynch.
Oh, Kermit. Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Kermit
I ran into Lyle in
yeah.
New York last week, and I told him the tasting. He's like, "What?
Right.
You don't have Aubert's wine?"
That's right.
And I'm
He said Lyle. But I think the thing is that Becky handles almost all his people and is friendly with them, but Kermit has a lockdown on some and Grand Cru on others. But in general, Becky represents many of these producers in some way or another, even if she may not be the importer of record. So anyway, A&P de Belen, Mercurey, La Digoine, it's a special site, and it's again, here it's partially destemmed. So even here, Aubert does not use 100% whole cluster, which he actually doesn't do either in Domaine del Romanée-Conti all the time. But they always try for more. Here they try for more of a balance between destemmed and whole cluster.
Yeah, just for the record, this is not labeled. It's in Mercurey area, but it's labeled as Bourgogne,
right.
Côte Chalonnaise.
Right.
We wanted to there are many Mercureys you can have, but we wanted to this is my favorite cru from their reds. They make delicious whites also. Of course, Bouzeron, that's where they are, and that's like all aligoté now, if you call Bouzeron the label. Initially, I thought this was going to be a white and red seminar, but then got corrected quickly by you.
Yeah.
But, I think a great story here, because, Aubert, before he took over Domaine de Romanée-Conti, had this small estate where he lived with his wife. And, Aubert is very humble. He will appreciate this wine next to Romanée-Conti in the same way. Of course, stylistically, they're quite different, but he's very much, and Kermit's a dear friend of Aubert for many years, and talking to Kermit about the old days of his engagement with Aubert, it's pretty striking because you never kind of think Kermit Lynch and Aubert are friends, but they are really, really close friends for many years. He's been bringing the wines in for a long time, and I've had some older vintages, 20-year-old bottles of Digoin, which are like really precise, and they lose. This wine is 17, so it's quite forward and quite opulent, but if you find this in a 13 or 8, it's quite taut, and you have to like acid, because that's something about all these wines that in these appellations, if you don't like acidity in Pinot Noir, they might not, it might not be your style of wine. Of course, they struggle at that ripeness in certain vintages, cooler vintages, but with these warming temperatures again, it seems quite opulent. The 17 especially, I think it's the only 17 we have in the mix. So, yeah, a lot of 17. Look forward to it. It's a very delicious vintage. You can drink them young, and people have compared the vintage to 99 in a way.
Which is, but we have two good vintages that we're tasting, 16, which was the poor crop, and 17, which was the large crop, and they're both different. They're very different from one another, and 16s have beautiful finesse when they're, what they had survived, especially in the area we're talking about, Côte de Beaune, Volnay, Pommard, very low yields, and disastrous for whites especially, but also for reds, depending on where you were. And, 16 was probably the worst year that they've experienced. They had from 12 to 6 through 16, that's quite a few vintages in a row. They had hail or frost, and it was just a disaster. 16, the famous thing, there was one barrel of Montrachet produced between 8 growers, and the 8 most important, they got together to make 1 barrel of Montrachet, when each of them separately, some of them made 4, some made 8. I mean, there were big producers, some made 2, 1, normally, but altogether, they got together to make 1 barrel, and they sold it at auction, or they had a price they actually set, and then it went to auction very quickly because it was so hard to get and went for a ridiculous price. So the reds and the whites both from this area are very precious. So if you get them, the prices probably aren't very much different than they were in 15. But the production is it depends where you are, but it could be half or a third of what it would have normally been. And then in 17, their cellars were full again. So there's a lot of 17 out there, but also I don't think the price is softened. But they have a lot more to sell, so it's more available at least. The interesting thing about Mercurey, because it's in the south, it was already planted. It was one of the earlier sites planted. The Cluny Monastery, they planted in the 12th century. So they've been growing red fruit here for a long time. And then the vinification of this, it's again 2/3 stems. It depends. So it's about 2/3, 1/3. The wine stays in tank for 12 days. Which is interesting. It's kind of like a cold soak, which is interesting because that's not the norm necessarily. And then you have the Mâconnais pressed is sometimes blended back. It's very classic, and it's 12 months. That's it. Very simple. That's all they give on the notes.
Yeah, organic.
Organic or biodynamic?
Organic.
Just organic. Okay. All right. Well.
Then we have Givry. Probably, I think I've seen, especially probably the most important producer we've seen in the past, and you still see some of the older vintages from Joblo around. Larry, you always had Givry by the glass at Rubicon back. You always loved Givry.
Yeah. Again, it depends on the producer. Again, like in these areas where there's so much land available and it's so widespread, you have to know the farmer and the site, and then and the winemaker. Usually they're all the same, the grower producer. And if you get a Negos, you're probably getting something that's not so typical of the region, but more typical of just a niche in their portfolio where they're trying to get a nice wine that's very flattering and early drinking and easy to drink for a lower price. But when you have producers who are making wine, often they're very proud of what they do. It may be their main focus for what they do, and they're going to make really good wines. So as with, even though Aubert owns DRC, he really makes wines in the Côte Chalonnaise. He created Bouzeron. He was really so instrumental in getting Bouzeron the recognition it deserved for Aligoté, and did all the research. And then he has great red sites as well, and he's very much wedded to it. And his nephew, Benoit, is taking over this running of the estate, as already has for like 8 years or more.
Benoit in the
in Mercure, in Bouzeron, actually, technically in Bouzeron at the Couvry for the A&P de Vilaine wines. So the family name is going to Bertrand de Vilaine. That's going to DRC, but another nephew is taking over, and it's another nephew of his, but it's a de Vilaine versus a Benoit. What's Benoit's last name? I can't think of it right now. Anyway, Benoit, he doesn't have the de Vilaine name. It's a sister's son, and so he gets the A&P de Vilaine site, whereas they believe that Bertrand should be taking over the DRC. And interestingly enough, Bertrand went to school in McMinnville.
Oh,
so
amazing.
Someone who's trained in Oregon is going to be in charge of DRC, or is in charge already, actually. So here we are in Givry. This is similar to what I was saying about the Haute Côte Chalonnaise. It was a favorite, though. What's interesting is today we have to struggle to get people to buy it. But in the 16th century and 17th, it was considered one of the favorite of King Henry the Fourth, and it's produced only in these in Givry with 3 hamlets around it, or 4 hamlets, and it's kind of an interesting site because of its position on the road between major forts like Autun and Dijon. So it became, in 46, it got an AOC, and it includes 38 Premier Climas. And if anybody can recite those, they can automatically become a master, I think, because I wouldn't be able to name a couple, really. So Clos Solomon is the most famous. That's traditionally been the one that people go to, Clos Solomon. And that's the one that we all looked for when I was studying. If I could find a Clos Solomon to figure out what a Givry was like, that was good.
Yeah, so, again, this is just, compare Givry to a little bit like Volnay. It's a higher altitude, and it's a very gentle slope, and the parcels are fairly large. And you have the Grand Piton, which is more kind of clay limestone, but more clay, and then as you go to the top, Clos Solomon is right in the middle. But again, very gentle slopes. There's a really nice video if you go on, I guess, the Bourgogne.com website. They have a nice video on the terroir of Givry. And I think that, it's only red is around 220 some hectare. So, there's a lot to be, you can find some really delicious wine. This one is just super juicy. This is 16 Domaine Mouton Givry Grand Breton. I always find the wines from Givry the most plump and the most opulent on the nose compared to the wines from Mercure Rouy are kind of more austere. So it's almost like Santenay and Givry have kind of a similarity in the style of wine, more kind of juiciness and much more fruit than maybe what you find in Rouy and Mercure.
Yeah, this one definitely, I think you get the red fruits, the strawberry, the red cherry, little cranberry in the finish. It's very nicely. I think it has a great, elegant, mouthfeel and finish. It's really delicious. Yeah. To me, to drink this today may be the best of the reds we had, or among the best for drinking today. And it has a lot of pleasure at this point. Time's up.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you.